For all the denials, the shifting of blame, and just plain lies, nothing beats this for rank hypocrisy. And we're part of it. The democratic dogs of war were unleashed upon a miserable state, and then claimed victory atop the moral high ground of liberation and freedom. But soon enough, the victors fell off the mountain by imitating the vanquished, with a cant display of thuggery, hubris and hair-splitting.
There is a difference between interrogation and interview. That is clearly spelled
This is Australia today, towards the pinnacle of Western civilization, a champion of liberalism, the rule of law and high democracy. Yet we blinked away recent history and locked up men, women and children seeking refuge from persecution. Shame on us. We're quick to rain on others.
And Dr. Mahathir and any other recalcitrants.
Australia should stop behaving as if it is there to teach us how to run our country.
But do we still live in a healthy democracy?
I think we are a healthy democracy, but you see perhaps a little fraying around the edges and some little frustrations popping up.
What is a parliamentary democracy? We elect representatives to Parliament, which then selects a government according to party numbers. By this system, the government is responsible to both the Parliament and the people. Is it still?
There's a general decline in Western democracies. Australia's not alone in this. There's a general mismatch between belief in democracy and confidence in democratic institutions. We've got serious problems relating to things like political finance. We have a very laissez-faire attitude towards who can give money to political parties, and that's an issue, I think, in terms of public confidence in our democracy, and it's an issue in terms of a level playing field for political parties.
To paraphrase Lincoln, democracy is government of the people, by the people and for the people. An alternative to mad clerics and bloody kings, it became a third way for imperial powers like Britain and, more recently, the US, which exports it with evangelical zeal.
Prime Minister John Howard is a leader of exceptional courage, who exemplifies the finest qualities of one of the world's greatest democracies. Proud to call him friend.
But in all the fuss and flag-waving, we've forgotten to keep democracy in check.
Over the voting screen and vote 1, 2, 3, 4.
The basic problem that we have is that we are not teaching young people thoroughly enough on how their system of government works.
Have you voted before this election? No.
And over time, I see this as being potentially dangerous in the context that history shows that when people ignore their democracy and forget about it, then other things can take over. I'm not saying that would necessarily happen in the case of Australia, but for good governments, for successful governance, I think a very good education in civics and how we're governed is essential.
OK. Has anybody got an absolute majority? Apple, so it's very safe for them.
While it may look as easy as apples and oranges, simply voting for one party in Australia doesn't necessarily mean that vote is counted as such.
These are recounted separately.
We have some quite basic problems about elections here. We haven't yet managed to achieve the basic democratic principle of one vote, one value. With above-the-line voting, parties are able to direct preferences in a way which would not necessarily be endorsed by their voters at all. And we saw that in Victoria, where a representative of the Family First Party was elected with less than 2% of the primary vote. But parties such as the Australian Labor Party and the Australian Democrats had directed their preferences to Family First, and voters voted for those parties above the line, little knowing where those votes would end up.
So you don't always get what you want, you get what you deserve.
People no longer vote for their representatives in Parliament. They vote for a leader. Members of Parliament are not able to play a true representative role in any case because they are bound by the very tight party discipline that we have in this country. And basically they're there to support their leaders. The executive government, particularly the Prime Minister of the day, dominates.
That just makes government more efficient, doesn't it?
Well, it's not more efficient because in the long run you have less deliberation about where government's going, about where policies are taking us, and at the end of the day you have bigger mistakes and bigger problems.
Told the day after.
The basis to a healthy democracy, an informed opinion.
What's happened, I think, is that Australian citizens are suffering from time poverty. Working hours are increasing. They're working longer hours than citizens in European democracies, for example, often balancing work and family responsibilities. This makes it difficult to digest sufficient information to really hold governments to account.
And how do you get information to make a decision when most of it comes from just a handful of sources who have their own agendas to push, usually profit-driven? Independence? Dream on, Pinko. And besides, there's no ratings or money in it.
In Australia today we have commercial television which is essentially uninterested in any serious political discussion. And then you have a media in the press which is astonishingly 70% dominated by one foreign owner of a highly political nature, Rupert Murdoch, and the rest with Fairfax and virtually nothing else. So you don't even have a duopoly. You have somewhere between a duopoly and a monopoly. And if the owner who has 70% cares about the political line of his newspapers, and we know that Rupert Murdoch does, you then have a situation where on certain issues, one line, for example, over the Iraq War or over the American-Australian alliance or over free trade or the free trade agreement with the United States and many other things, even more strikingly over the question of media regulation, where one line comes daily to a large proportion of the population. And if you have no commercial television challenging that, and if you have an ABC which every time it shows any kind of sign of difference from the mainstream view is sat upon as a conspiracy of left-wingers, you have, in my view, a recipe for a very, very simple-minded society.
Is our cherished liberal democracy returning to the original decadent Roman era, with a witless mob placated by bread and circuses? The great unwashed, entertained by political jesters, juggling with our future?
I sometimes characterise it as a situation now where the defining idea about making life better is currently material progress. That's associated with a sort of competitive, self-interested individualism, which produces a shallow democracy. That is where we see our duties as citizens as essentially going out and voting every few years whoever offers us the best deal. So, for example, the biggest tax cut, and that then produces this very shallow democracy which diminishes well-being.
So, as a depressed, dumbed-down electorate, we have less time and choice but to believe everything we're told. Opinion polls, like horse races, only tell us who's ahead.